this subject is very fascinating, and I'm slightly going to deviate from my usual pattern of speaking only impromptu, because few things which the mother has spoken I have kept with me to share as we come. I'm sure we all know this. So, there are several ways of looking at Auroville. It's a city, it's an institution, it's a idea, it's a conception, it's a labor, it's a utopia in the making, as the mother put it. It's not a ready-made utopia. As I said, there is no ready-made utopia. Even if we enter a utopia, we have to be ready to receive it. So there is nothing like a ready-made utopia. That's why. Because people often ask if divine is there and he has to do things, why doesn't he just do it with a magic wand? He will do it, but we'll again destroy it because we are not ready to receive. So therefore, we have to labor. Labor so that we can receive rightly. And let me start from this very story of how the Pandavas have to labor for many years of Tyaga and Tapasya. Why? Because Yudhishthira has been chosen, even before his birth, that he would become not only the emperor of then Aryavarta, what today we call as Bharatvarsh, but not only that, he has to embody all the best qualities that are possible in a person who has to govern a kingdom. And therefore he has to go through all the trouble, challenges and turmoils. And Shri Krishna lets him go through all that. He doesn't just do a magic wand and suddenly, everybody's mind changes or everybody loses a battle. No, because when at the end of it, when he gets the kingdom, he understands what really dharma is in all its details, in all its minute functionings. So too with life, and one thing is very, very evident, which I have observed about, it's there all over, about Sri Aurobindo's yoga, about the ashram, about Auroville, that if one is not ready for a long and steady labor, then this is not a place. It's not like we pay some money and there are ready-made flats and we just go take the key and only arrange things. And it's very evident because it's millenniums of habits, patterns, beliefs, systems, various kinds of steps which have become now an entrapment. They were needed in the evolutionary journey. That's what the mother and Sri Aurobindo described to us. There is the stage when the reptiles were there, and though that age has been crossed, something of that reptile still crawls in human nature. Something of the dinosaur continues to live. And that's why human beings have a fascination for movies like that. Because it is there, it's not gone. And that's why we see that every previous attempt to create an ideal society, what may be called as a spiritualized society, has been at best partially successful and for a short time. Because human nature being what it is, see, this earliest ages, even the Vedic age, they tried to create an ideal society. And this has been there in all the areas of the world. But in India we have the records which are preserved, that's the difference. So they tried to create an order, social order, based on deeper spiritual understanding, based on dharma. We can't have an order without any kind of law. And there have been two laws which have been operating in parallel in this world. One is the human law. As human beings begin to grow, their mind, because of challenges, problems, issues, difficulties, we start making laws. And there is another set of law which is deeply ingrained in our very heart, the divine law, for which we see prophets come, messengers come, and they give us a law which becomes a religious law, an edict along, through which human beings have to move. But both fail in the end. There have been efforts towards it. Why? Because religious law is received without having the experience of the person who has given it. So when we follow a religious law and don't have the yoga with which a person arrived at a certain kind of way of life, then we create a chaos, such a terrible chaos as we see today. There are religions which speak about, almost all religions, we speak about wonderful things, but it fails because when a person at a certain stage of evolution utters something, and when we receive it, and obviously there is a big gap, that gap can only be filled by yoga. The mind cannot fill it. Therefore, the first condition of any spiritualized society is to take into yoga, return back to that primal roots, aspiration, yoga. And any society where the yoga was lost, as it tends to be lost, in every religion we see these three things. One is the core, which is spiritual. And it may be partial, complete, near complete, that's a different story. Some glimpse which is spiritual. Then we have a whole set of ways of life that we have to undertake. And then we have the most external rituals. And repeatedly, because mankind has a tendency to get trapped into the most external, it is visible, tangible, and therefore there have to be people who spring up back to the core, connect with the core, and keep the yoga alive. This is how we see, at least in Sanatan Dharma, it has been kept alive, simply because of the fact that it admits the possibility of union with the divine, and therefore there have been people who have come and they have freshly understood what really the whole matter is about, truth is about, and therefore things have evolved and changed because the outer cannot be made a permanent basis. So this is how evolution takes place even in religious law. We have religions, then we have different paths. And the other is man-made law. This also fails. And this fails for very obvious reason, because human mind is not the creator of this universe. Well, if human mind is the creator, as some believe, there is hardly any hope. But, well, fortunately, human mind is not the creator of this universe. And therefore, any man-made system will by its very nature be incomplete. This sheer plain logic. Even with the best of intentions, when a doctor gives a medicine, and the medicine has been produced, let's say, in an ideal world with the best of intention, it still will create one good and it will create another harm. And harm is not just about side effects. Let's say, for instance, modern medicine, it has done wonderful things, but robbed us of our natural capacity to heal ourselves. It's a very big price that we have paid. So, because human mind cannot see all sides of a problem, it cannot comprehend the root issues. So therefore, if we believe that human mind can solve the problems of mankind, I think we are asking for the impossible, and I often suggest with the human mind, you want to solve the problems of humanity and world and Auroville and all those things. Can you just solve the problem within your house? And when I use the word house, I mean the confines of a small little family. It's so difficult. Human mind cannot. And there we hit the core of the problem. The core of the problem is that in the process of individualization, why individualization? Sri Aurobindo describes beautifully that there are three terms. This is something very unique to Indic thought, but Sri Aurobindo brings it out very beautifully. Not all Indic thought, well, the Gita and Sri Aurobindo particularly, they speak about it. There are three terms at which the divine manifests: the individual, the universal, and the transcendent. It's there in Christian mystic thought, but it has been lost. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. It has been lost because the yoga has been lost. That has been one of the problems. In Islam, the yoga has been lost. So, this is the fundamental unit of individual, and making an individual requires that the individual or the developing consciousness has to separate itself from the rest. It's like putting, the base of ice cream is the same, but we want to have different flavors. So we put it in a separate mold and add different flavors. So you have butterscotch, you have pistachio, and you have chocolate, and you have vanilla, and all these flavors. The divine wants a many-flavored ice cream, not just a single flavor or all khichdi flavor. So as a result, it has to separate itself, and that's why the ego has been created. The ego has been created so that each one of us develop along unique lines. We express some mode or other of the divine, of that totality, of that infinite consciousness, and that's where the problem lies. That when the mold is broken, as long as we are inside the mold, it's okay. But when the mold is broken, it either creates a tremendous chaos, misunderstanding, conflict, trying to prove a point. In one word, it is the ego, which is the real bar. Now, in individual life itself, ego is a big challenge to overcome. Why? Because on one side, it is required to preserve our so-called individuality, and on the other side, it is a big bar when we take to spiritual life. So what is the solution? The Mother and Sri Aurobindo given us a beautiful solution, that ego is a scaffolding. Behind the individual ego, there is the true individual soul. So to finish the ego without discovering this individual soul, the psychic being in us, is not the way, because then we become like a football. There are so many people who come and say that, I want to overcome my ego, I want to overcome this part of ego, that part of ego. It doesn't work out. So they go to an extent of becoming a martyr. That, well, I should not be egoistic. So whoever kicks me, I must accept it. Why? Because I should not be martyr. It's like the tolerant people give rise to so much intolerance in the world because they want to be tolerant. So they tolerate intolerance. And so intolerance multiplies because this is now not how it can be done. So what is important is to discover the individual psychic being. Then at least the individual ego is rightly replaced. The scaffolding goes and then the individual is there. It becomes the stable basis, the immortal self, and it becomes the stable basis for further evolution in light and freedom and joy. This is still simple because there have been people who have done that, discovered the individual self within, and they have lived very beautifully, harmoniously with their surroundings. It is said that in the atmosphere of such a yogi, the tiger and deer, they do not fight. Human beings do. Fortunately, this saying is not applicable to human beings can fight anywhere. We have that capacity. It's such a strange paradox. Nature has made her, dropped off her nails, dropped off her canines, everything is gone. But still we can fight. And fight so badly because we have a weapon, and that is called speech. Which has been the cause of so much destruction in the world. But that apart, that's a different story altogether. But still, there have been individuals who have got over their ego self. They have discovered the true self within. And they live in harmony. If you read Mother's, one of the books that she used to recommend, she has read also in the Wednesday classes or Friday classes, Wu Wei. The way, it's something very beautiful. It's about how to live life beautifully, harmoniously in a yogic way. It's something amazing. So, there have been individuals who have discovered it, and it has been presumed that if there are many individuals who discover it, we'll have a beautiful life. So that's how we see that certain collective spiritual organizations have evolved. That if all of us discover our individual self, life would become beautiful. I wish it could, because even when we discover the individual self, our nature remains what it is. It can be to an extent modified. Somebody who has discovered the psychic being, somebody who has discovered the spiritual self, it doesn't mean that the nature is automatically transformed. And great yogis who saw this paradox when they discovered their true self and the movements of nature, so they just said this is not possible. So you discover the individual self, live to an extent it is possible in harmony with whatever, and then you, at the end, you have to release yourself. That's why we see that even sages like Durvasa, whose word was truth, he was not an ordinary sage. Somebody, if he said something, it turned out to be true. That means there was a great tapasya, and yet he had no control over his anger. We have examples of Gautam Rishi, we have examples of Vishwamitra. So, even the great sages and saints and rishis, they still had this problem of human nature. And this is a problem nobody has really tackled. And in traditional yoga, the way is that, well, make it a little more sattvic. So I think before we can talk about superhumanity, Mother speaks of an important step, which I think is so important even to lead a simple, beautiful life, forget about superhumanity. She says, before you can reach there, there is a step that all of us must take, and that is be reasonable. The whole aphorism of Sri Aurobindo, where Mother has dedicated only to this, be reasonable. And being reasonable is that when we have expectation, have reasonable expectations. If we have demands, have reasonable demands, both from life as well as from people around. When we communicate with people, be reasonable. Don't cross a certain line. These are, in modern society, this is one gift that most of us tend to hopefully become reasonable. But in yoga, there is another challenge. And the challenge is because we want to transcend reason. And in the process, we are likely to become irrational. It is a fact. And Shubhda speaks about it. That suddenly the mental control with which we normally operate, that's our operating system, because we start exploring territories and boundaries which are beyond the realm of the mind, and this I'm talking of genuinely exploring. The way the mind operates with our nature, with instinct, with certain things, that is unplugged. We are as if unplugged and not yet replugged. Sri Aurobindo speaks of this stage of a transition between when the mental control is not there and the psychic control has not come up. And that's why yoga is not meant for all. This is first thing which Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, because you have to cross through. Other day someone was asking, in Savitri there is a line, to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty Mother stark awake. So what are the dangerous spaces? It is a dangerous space. Reason keeps us within a small narrow band. Move within this range. But there are territories where we don't go. Reason tells us, But the moment these spaces begin to open up, we see that strange things begin to happen. And that's where it becomes difficult. This is the first level of difficulty that one encounters when one takes to spiritual life. And it may sound, okay, it's just a little bit, but it becomes formidable because, especially in a yoga where we enter into the fields of nature to change it, our individual difficulties are compounded by the difficulties of the group life. It's easy to understand even ordinarily there is an interdependence between the individual and the group. And therefore, the Mother speaks of the double effort. The collective life must also evolve as well as the individual, because otherwise there is an interdependence. Beyond the point, let's take an example that you are living in a society, and now we are talking of society, we are not isolated beings, and there is a group which says, chalo, chalo, let's go for a movie, or let's, So it has an impact, even when an individual has to work so much upon oneself to master this urge than when one is living, let's say, in a forest. But the Mother and Sri Aurobindo want us to take that challenge. She says that at one place she says, she speaks passingly, this should not be turned into a judgment, but passingly she says, to start all over again in some Himalayan gorge with just about few people. Then she says, well, that has been tried, but it doesn't work. We know what happened to Shangri-La. I mean, people even now talk about Shangri-La and Gyanganj, and there are different names people have given to some idyllic place in the Himalayas. And in this place, everybody lives happily, harmoniously. But the problem is they do not come in contact with the world. There was a movie based on Shangri-La, because the moment they come in contact with the world, they catch the disease. Like one of the things which was there in Shangri-La is that they don't age. And the only people who can reach everywhere are the reporters. So one curious reporter manages to sneak in, and he falls in love with one of the girls in that Shangri-La, and finally he convinces her, no, we'll go out, it's a wonderful world out there, this world is nice, but it's all clouds and heavenly music, you don't know what is pizza, you don't know what is, the joy of the adventure. So finally she agrees, and she is very beautiful, perennially beautiful. Very beautiful is okay, but perennially beautiful, they don't age. But as they step out, she suddenly turns old, and within moments she turns into dust. It's very tragic, and you see in that movie. Because any contact with the outside world. So this is another challenge, which we see that the mother speaks several times about Auroville. The porousness, where it will mix, how much it should mix, how much it should not. In ashram, she had created a little more stricter. Strict is not a way of correct thing, because, well, those who come, they are meant to, expected to make a conscious choice. So it's not like strict like an imposed discipline. But it was understood that if there is too much of intermingling, because one evolution is like that, it will create a certain type of humanity, which will begin to become different from the rest. Many of us understand this very well, that you can't go back to the same relatives, go back in the same atmosphere which one was accustomed to earlier. And one is to respect that, because this is a different venture, and if we keep doing it, it's not healthy. Mother used to say this, that if you do that, that's why we have cinema halls inside the ashram. When cinema came and people wanted to watch cinema, she would buy all the tickets. I think it was one of the French places, I'm forgetting the name. So people would go and watch the. Why? Because she said this is a very special endeavor. One has to understand what it means. And if there is a premature intermingling, it creates its problems. It's only when one is ready, strong, that it can have an impact. Otherwise, there is every likelihood that as the plant is developing, it can be eaten up. So all this, when we look into Mother and Sri Aurobindo's writings, she had foreseen about Auroville also. She says, who will come? And she says, they must know why they are coming here. And she speaks about initially taking on a period of, it's like a trial. She has used the word trial period. It applies in the ashram also. And why they use the word trial period? To see how you react to the community based on a new consciousness, and how the community reacts to you, and all this. So there is a trial period in which people are taken in to see how far they have accepted it. And one has to understand there are several things. He says people must know that this is not a place for easy life, for a comfortable life, for a life of desires. All this is there written in her when she speaks about Auroville, something very similar to ashram, but for Auroville, just imagine a town where you are not supposed to live for desires. What towns, all cities, all cities have developed around desires. In one of her early writings, she speaks about the atmosphere of Paris. Now, people would love to go and, we went to Paris. Now, it's not only Paris, it could equally apply to Mumbai. It could apply to Chennai, it could apply to London, New York. But she says the atmosphere is so much more difficult and dense. And it is so true. Even in one of her prayers, she says, how much more effort will be required to pull those who are plunged in darkness in the life of the cities. See, this is a difference, because village life grew organically. There were people who were there, they developed roots, cultivated. It developed in a very natural way, but city life is a very, very artificial way, because people start some factories, industries, and people rush there, and then there is money, then there is ease of living, comfort, so they rush towards cities, and then the whole city develops around desired self. And of course, to sometimes in some cities you want to also, you realize, feed also to the inner self, so there will be some temple or something or the other or some cultural center to feed your inner self, but largely it is developed around the city. So imagine a city which she wants to build, where you are not there to satisfy your desires. Not only that, she says you have to overcome your desires. First challenge for human beings. People often ask, if desire is not there, then what is there in life? Somebody asked the mother, Mother, you are saying in the new creation there would not be a digestive system. It will be replaced by constant interchange of energies. So the person asked Mother that, Mother, what will be the joy of living if we don't have food? And she said, that means one is not ready. One is not ready for this. She's not saying don't eat or fast. She's not saying don't enjoy if you have a good food. But to live for eating, to be preoccupied with food, either ways. This is just one example. She's not saying that wear any kind of sannyasi clothes, dirty clothes. No. Wear decent clothes, but don't start living around, centering around clothes. That's how we see most of the life. No possessions, very difficult. There is a very beautiful term, these are terms from the Gita which I correlate when I read. For instance, one word is aparigraha. Shubinda has written a whole letter on aparigraha. Aparigraha means I own nothing. Very interesting. We are so used to owning from wife and husband and children to houses and objects and everything. And that's why we understand how profound and far-reaching is this vision. Where she says in Auroville, nobody owns anything. But there has to be an owner. We can't understand it. When she gave the charter that Auroville belongs to nobody in particular, she hesitates on what to put next. She says, if I write no nation, then Indian government will be furious. You don't belong here, you will follow the rules or no? Well, if you are in a land, you have to follow the rules of the land. If I write no civilization, again there will be problem. So she wrote a very vague word and she says, I have deliberately used the vague word. And the vague word was to humanity as a whole. And she said, I have deliberately left it vague. So that nobody, she says, but there will be differences. Now everybody thinks they are the humanity. But, she says, because people will not understand this. So she adds, but to live in Auroville, one has to be the willing servitor of the divine consciousness. Here again she makes a little commentary. She says, I wanted to write divine. But again they will come up with their notions of God. Divine, no. Okay, divine consciousness, yes, that sounds a bit impersonal. So she is... So meaning thereby, when it is said that it doesn't belong to anybody but belongs to humanity as a whole, there is a keyword, the most important aspect which we miss out, and that is but to live in Auroville. One has to be a willing, not just a servitor because, I have to work for 6 hours. It doesn't mean that. Willing. See, this again, the Gita speaks of glad. See, Gita says that, surrender is not something which is forced upon you. It should be something glad, it should be joyous. The divine, it doesn't taste good when we are bitter and say, I have to work. Divine finds that chocolate, bitter chocolate. No, bitter chocolate may be good for health, but divine doesn't, I don't know. But it doesn't sound tasty to the divine. So when we are glad, willing servitor makes a big difference. When we are willing servitors, we are ready to work. We are no more working for money, but for the joy of serving the divine. And repeatedly she insists on karma yoga, the joy of serving the divine. And honestly, there is no greater joy than that in the world. But well, as they say, those who are bitten, they understand that there is no greater joy. The joy of serving the divine, there's just for the sake of serving the divine. And where would one fix the limit that these many hours I am going to work and I won't work here? The whole world becomes a field. So she says, but to live in Auroville, one has to be the willing servitor of the divine consciousness, the very first condition, at the entry point. And then later on she said something very amazing, very powerful, one of the most powerful Mahavakyas I have ever read in any of Mother's writings. Each of them is a Mahavakya. But she says, when it was asked, who is the owner of Auroville? And that 3 words, they hit you so beautifully, so hard. Who is the owner of Auroville? She says, the Supreme Lord. The whole core, the Supreme Lord. It changes the whole perspective. Can I understand the ways of working of the Supreme Lord? So people who pass a judgment, premature judgment, she says at one place, the Auroville is going to be, even if it takes hundreds and thousands of years, she uses this time span. Why? Because it is the Supreme Lord's initiative. But fortunately, or unfortunately, depends on how we look at it, we cannot understand the ways of the Lord, who makes harmony emerge through strife. Often people say, when we look at Auroville, when it started, the history, it started with a big bang, and soon there was a strife. And not an ordinary strife. I don't even want to put adjectives to that strife. Why there is strife? Because he said, let's start with the ultimate problem. So all different human natures, nationalities, everything, they come together and there is a strife, and a terrible strife. Why? Because he said, let's start with the ultimate challenge of division, extreme division. What we are facing now is nothing. It's a much more reduced version. That's how the divine works. Time to time this strife will emerge. Why? Because that is the way it has to be resolved. It is there inside. Often people nowadays ask this question that, have we become very intolerant and all kinds of things are coming up? Well, they're coming up because they are unresolved issues which are inside. And human nature has to figure out a way. Guided by the divine, it will figure out a way that they have to be resolved. You can't let them be buried. So often we can use it this way, that justice and challenges to ideologies, religions. So here we come to the next level of challenge in a collective life. So there have been collective lives, as I said, collective spiritualized society, but the problem there have been too sectarian. Sikh, the Khalsa, Sri Aurobindo says it was the last effort to form a spiritualized society. And a very beautiful effort, where there were only two principles, that you do remember the name and you share with everybody. I don't know, I've forgotten, Vandchak, you may know better. Naam Jap, Vandchak. Kirat kar. Do your work, karma yoga, do your work as dedication to the divine. And whatever you are eating, share with everybody. It's a collective thing. It's not only about eating. All possessions you share with everybody. Everything belongs to everybody. But the problem was, it was one angle of approach. So there again we see that it is difficult to integrate with different kinds of approaches, because divine is infinite. So it itself falls into this tendency to become a religion, especially when, the living masters, they are replaced by a book, great book, scripture, and it tends to crystallize. And external is more important, how you dress, how you wear, it becomes more important than the inner realization. So Auroville has to again exist by the force of inner realization, because she has not left any of these external scaffoldings on which we can hold on and say that I am an Aurovillian. It is so difficult. Just entering Auroville, and he has a good criteria, the guard on the road. He doesn't see anything. He sees Pondicherry car or Tamil Nadu car. I don't know. He has some kind of a brainwave. Based on that he stops. So because there is no other way. And you have to explain, I am going for a talk. First of all, he looks and he doesn't believe that, he doesn't look like a Babaji going for a talk. So, but I think living here, they have got trained. So I have to say Pondicherry Ashram, Auroville, like trying to say that I belong to all these places. Oh, Pondicherry Ashram, okay, go. There is no external criteria. There is nothing which is outward, which is so beautiful. So you have to find the deep connection. But we have collective egos which take different forms. One of the commonest form is, of course, we know ego, which is based on purely the place that we live. It is the most grossest form of ego. And when in the ashram context, people asked her, now though they have guest houses, Karnataka Nilayam, Odia Nilayam, all this is there. But when mother was asked about it, people even wanted to have groups like that. She says, provincial spirit is out of place in yoga. It's a fundamental thing. Based on language you speak, custom, tradition. Because why? Because we want that comfort zones. And she says that Auroville is not a place for comfortable life, means comfort zones. Oh, he speaks the same language as mine, very nice. You eat the same food as mine, very nice. These are very gross things. And the least is to get rid of this, overcome, go past this provincial spirit. But then provincial spirit is one part. There are other forms of collective egos. There is the national ego. So again, like our individual ego, this is something very, it's important, because there are people, I myself used to believe at one point, national boundaries, religion boundaries, you have to transcend it, till it hit me hard that this is so dangerous when I read what Sri Aurobindo has written about the world state. And now of course we know about the deep state. I think many people know how dangerously world is being controlled by a few people who are literally, it's not about believing in conspiracy theory, but facts are there that, how they are engaged in moving government, shifting businesses, and what a deep net of money has gone into it. Money and political ambition, but this is not the subject. But just like family is the first unit where we learn about collective living. They want to break the family unit. It's very risky. Family is the first step in which we learn to share. This is the minimum. And the next unit is, we have the national, where we have to learn to be together. But there again, not through the national ego, because nationalism can be of two types. One is the egoistic, ambitious, aggressive type. And if I may use the word, Ravana type of nationalism, where he wants Kishkinda, where he wants Dandakaranya, where he wants the other places. And the other is Rama type. He clears all these places with the Rakshasa type of humanity, establishes dharma, but he doesn't occupy any of these places. He gives it back to the local native people and comes back to Ayodhya, where he reigns. So this is another kind of nationalism, where within a national boundary, each nation is unique, it has a nation's soul, and it is around this we must center and not around the national ego. So there is a difference. Just as there is a individual soul, we have to discover the national soul and align with it. It doesn't matter where we are born, wherever we are born, obviously, with that national soul, and we have to bring that into an offering in the yajna of Auroville. The best in a nation, the deepest essence of a nation, and each nation has that. But very often, we know what happened in the beginning. The national egos came, and therefore there were fights. So national ego is much more formidable. Whereas we have to discover, each one here also has a national background, and one has to discover the national soul. Not belong to a nationality, but one has to discover and bring it as that, as an offering. Then there is, apart from national ego, religious ego. My religion is bestest. It's like kids who say my papa is best, till they discover all papas are the same. There is nothing so special about my papa. But as a child it's okay. So when religions are in very kiddie stages, they say, my religion is the best. Till then it's okay. But when you say my religion is the only religion, when you say that my papa is the only papa, you are a fatherless child, then there is a problem, serious problem. So religious ego, fanaticism, fundamentalism breeds intolerance. And it comes from, the mother says, exclusivity of religion. This is the only problem. Remove it, everything is fine. There is no issue. But the moment a religion says exclusive, that's why here she says no religions in Auroville. But human beings, we are experts at making a religion out of no religion. I think. Yes, that's a fact. I was so surprised. I saw that religion out. I am not going to talk about it in detail. A whole group has been organized. No religion. It's like there is a cult of atheism. Be a seeker. It doesn't matter what you call yourself or what the world calls you. So there can be, we have a tendency to form groups and, cults around whatever, but that's how humanity advances. So no religions. So you can't hold on to your religion in its outer aspect. Inner core, yes, inner core of every religion is spiritual. And it sticks so hard. Imagine when Sayyid Ibrahim had come, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, he came to know about his past life. They told him, you are Dara Shikho, Dara. They gave him the name of Dara. He had the experience of the divine everywhere, thanks to the grace of Sri Aurobindo, because when he came, Sri Aurobindo asked him, have you been to the sea? He said, yes. How did you like the sea? Very good. And then he said, sir, is there a divine also in the sea? Because according to certain religions, divine is up there in the seventh heaven. But Indic religions, they take it that divine is also in you and in every element of creation. There's a fundamental difference. So he says, Sri Aurobindo said, yes, lifted his foot a few inches above the stool on which it was resting. And placing it back on the stool, he said, yes, and he had the experience of the divine. Otherwise, he was thinking that, I am a Muslim, probably he will not, they all talk about Krishna and I won't have. And he had that experience. And in spite of that, at one point, he saw people are doing agarbatti. Now, there was a logic behind it, of offering flowers. So he writes a letter to Sri Aurobindo, I want to do my namaz 5 times a day. And it is to him that Sri Aurobindo writes that famous letter on fundamentalism and fanaticism. He said, you have to understand, it's not that agarbatti is being allowed or darshan pranam as a practice of Hinduism. There is a deep sense within it. So when we talk about religion, very often we discard the baby with the bath water. We have to understand that spiritual core has been preserved in many places, is intact, and that spiritual core we must connect it. It becomes a religion when everybody has asked that you must offer flowers at the samadhi, then there is a religion. Like I see mothers, well-meaning mothers, bringing their little children, and when the child is playful around the samadhi, they catch the head, put it on the samadhi, go down, and suddenly the child is lost. That I thought I am going to meet the divine, such a wonderful divine. What's my mummy doing? Or when they go to dining room, she force feeds. Because if you don't eat, it is prasad, you are doing blasphemy. It's the same tendency. That's not how it is done. So that freedom is allowed. But this freedom is simply because we have to explore the divine along different lines. This freedom is not meant for doing what we like. Repeatedly, Mother says, this freedom is not licentiousness. This freedom is to allow each one to explore and connect with the divine in one's own way. So this freedom is an antidote to fundamentalism, which is about exclusivity approach and compelling everybody to do something by force. No, there is no compulsion. But does it mean that I will do whatever I feel like? Not at all. When people ask the mother, so-and-so is getting drunk, what should we do? She said they must understand that drunkenness and unconsciousness has no place in Auroville. And she says the same about drugs. So mother is asked, what should we do? Because we were sending the person away, but you said, yes, you keep. She said, no, it didn't happen like that. The person didn't tell me anything, just wrote to me that I want to stay on. I said, yes. But in future, I am telling you that if you find such thing, you can do it yourself. You don't have to ask me. These are words all documented. Life of drugs, licentiousness, alcohol has no place because it is going to retard everybody's progress because it's something so important. She made one concession though. She said there are individual cases where people they get, it's a different story. They have many years they have worked here, lived here, and then they get into something as part of the challenges of nature which come out. She said that is a different thing altogether. But otherwise, it's there in her words, so I get very surprised when there are people who speak about freedom, therefore, she has allowed anything, everything. In her own writings, it is there. They should be sent away. These are her words. So this is a very specialized kind of effort. And we should be happy that we are participant to a great event. We may not live to see in this body, but to even participate in a collective yajna is something so beautiful. So there are religious egos and there are worse still ideological egos. Mother has said ideologies and religions stand on the same level. Like ambition and sex stand on the same level as far as the downfall is concerned. So ideologies and religions stand on the same level. Religions still at least have one focus. You can say, okay, he is also seeking God, I am also seeking God. But in ideology, the thing can be so strong. Some of the most intolerant debaters on television, I am not recommending it should ever be watched unless you want to go crazy. If you don't respect your sanity, watch these debates, ideological debates, and when we look at them, one can see that the most intolerant people are those who are crying for tolerance. And they don't want the other type to ever be near. Ideologies are man-made, they are mental things, they are useful as a scaffolding, they have their place. But this is for something higher. None of the ideologies, if they could save the world would have already been saved. But they have not been able to save the world. Ideologies, religions, they have not been able to save mankind, they have helped us. So the focus comes back on to spiritualization. And the mother says very clearly this too. She says, if you don't want to do yoga, then why are you here? These are her words. She never said people will do it any which way. She is not going to impose anything. She is very vast. But it is very clear, this is a place. Karma yoga is the minimum. But she says it's a cradle of the Superman and it is to prepare the superhumanity of the future. So when we set these things inwardly in the right place, then the whole effort becomes so beautiful, meaningful. It's not a meaningless free-for-all freedom, do whatever we like, and somehow something will happen. One day we will have this grand utopia ready. More likely we will take it, pull it down towards destruction. But then I always remember when in Savitri, and that's what happens to the collective life of mankind. There is a parable for the search of the soul. So Savitri starts looking into her soul. She sees that there is the surface life in which human beings are engaged. It's the ordinary life of mankind, where we are just living, running from one event to another, circumstance to another, situation to another, one food packet to another, like that. Then there is the inner life, where so much more is happening about which we are not aware. And first step is to become aware of the inner life. And deep within is she used the word, the secret king, who is sitting. But he is guarded by the gods. You can't see him, it's still a prince. So only when he grows that he steps into the outer chamber. But for this great spiritual change to be, the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms. So it is not that Auroville can be created without finding the psychic being, psychic transformation, spiritual transformation. It's an impossibility. The rest of humanity is trying, each one is trying their own ideal world, but it is a very special effort. So she sees this is there, but again she sees, but all is there, even God's opposites. So we think that these conflicts that take place from time to time are only external. But the greater the challenge, the greater will be the forces, tremendous forces which are going to oppose it. Why? Because when she was asked, why are you making Auroville? Several places, one place she speaks about human unity, but one place she repeatedly speaks of Auroville as, she says, that's why there is Auroville. And she saw that the world is on an imminent catastrophe. And all this is, when Sri Aurobindo is there, this idea of Auroville is, she says as a child she had the formation. And if you look at it, ultimately the search for an ideal city has been there since the time mankind began to form groups and began to think and see. So since childhood, but she left it because this is a later work. Mankind has to evolve much before one can talk about a collective organization centered around the divine. It's very difficult. So she left it in Paris, which later on it seems the architect picked it up. And Sri Aurobindo and the mother had spoken about it. A place where Sri Aurobindo will be at the center. Then later on, Huta comes up with a suggestion, Mother, why not near the lake? We'll have this, that. She talks about discusses the plans, 1965, and she says, why not near the lake? And there will be a hillock on which my house will be there and your house will be at the center. And Mother laughs. She says, I'm not going anywhere. And her reason is so amazing. She says, I'm not going anywhere from here because the Samadhi is here. No other reason. But then she says, time to time I can come in the car and I can be there. Even we know that during Sri Aurobindo's physical presence in Hyderabad, there was a place likely to come up. Everything was almost finalized until for some major, one issue, but a very major issue about, I think, how it will interact with the outside world. And that's where it stopped. And then she gave up the idea. And then it came up again, and came up when Huta speaks about it. And then in 1968, we know that, how it started, and that, of course, we are well aware. So this is something which is a tremendous effort, and there are forces behind to destroy it. So this is very interesting. She speaks about it is Tower of Babel in reverse. So we all know about Tower of Babel, that people are building a tower from earth to heaven. It's a very interesting analogy. It reminded me of the way of the Gita. If you want a beautiful world, remember the Ashwath tree, Urdharva Moola Shaka. So it means that tree of life, its the roots are in heaven. So every time I go to some place and see a logo where they make the tree of life, I tell them that your painting is put in the wrong way. What do you mean? I said, you have to keep it upside down. No, but it will look odd. I said, yes, creation is odd. The only way you can make sense is if you look at it upside down. Otherwise, you can't make sense. Because origin is the divine. That's why when she was asked, how can humanity become one? She said, by becoming conscious of its origin. So, it's a Tower of Babel in reverse, because this tower was being built, and when the devil saw, the word devil is very devilish, but anyways, those forces which oppose human unity, let's use a modern term, but maybe it may be judgmental. So he started creating confusion in the minds of people. They knew that human beings form a bridge through speech. So he disturbed the speech in such a way that when one said X, the other person heard Y and understood Z in his mind. And the confusion started. They started fighting. The bricks which are meant for building the tower started throwing at each other. So it remained incomplete. Now this story, she speaks about Tower of Babel in reverse. Now there people came together, they end up fighting. She says humanity should come together in a great effort. But it is to start with the divine and then let it spread. First task is to find the divine. It cannot be otherwise. And then let it spread outward and downward. And I have this another take from this very interesting story which the mother has said. As long as we emphasize so much on the outer speech and language and all this, there will be problem. Languages never create unity. But when we look at the heart and the ideal that is enshrined there, or the divine presence, then we can have the unity. It will spontaneous, it will come about. So she spoke about it as a Tower of Babel in reverse. Meaning thereby first discover the roots and the seed. And where is the seed of Auroville? It is the Supreme Lord. There is no other way. As long as we understand that it is the Supreme Lord who is involved in Auroville, and we have to find Him, connect with Him. Any which way, it doesn't matter. And then we can probably participate in the true way. Till then we are only, as he said, apprentice Superman. So before we just maybe just read a little bit, just 2-3, at least the charter I'll read. Before we do anything, this discovery of the divine presence, he speaks about, that is the first fundamental necessity. And then all the rest comes as a natural consequence. So Auroville, as it is today, as I understand, and I think it's true of Ashram also, but Ashram is a slightly different organization. In the Ashram, Sri Aurobindo speak about the human atmosphere and the divine atmosphere. And Rishabh Chand put it in a very nice way. He said, if people come here, Mother, and if they see us, they will never want to stay here. But if they see you, they will never want to go away from here. So, Auroville also exists on two levels. One is where a higher humanity, at least humanity which doesn't want to engage in that kind of deep yoga, but at least it's present, which wants life to become better, which has goodwill, which wants to collaborate. It wants world to become a better place, at least a kind of human unity. But this layer will only work if there is that other layer, which is a spiritualized humanity striving towards things like divine realization, spiritual transformation, transformation of nature, the key which was missing in past religious efforts. Then only it will be possible. If this increases and that is not increasing, it is bound to collapse. So the method is the same that she's advised. Whenever you meet with a difficulty, she advises regarding Auroville difficulties also. What is to be done? Instead of complaining, grumbling, she says, intensify your aspiration. It is so beautiful a method. Any difficulty, one can literally use the word any means any. Any and many together. Let's put it like that. So the way is not to start analyzing each difficulty, try to see, do this, do that, but to intensify the aspiration. See if there is a core where the aspiration for Auroville, for the divine manifestation upon earth, is completely seizes our whole being. It doesn't matter, it could be a group now, in time and space, wherever it is. Of course, if we can join together in various ways, people are trying, it will be wonderful. So she gave the path towards meeting the difficulties by intensifying the aspiration. There is a very beautiful place where she says in 1954, she says, this is the condition of the earth and it is not very beautiful. But there is something we can do, and this something she can do is by intensifying our aspiration, by conquering space and time for the divine. Meaning thereby that little space I call the body, or the little space which is there in which I am putting my step. If that can be made entirely filled with divine atmosphere and time, if in a day I have 24 hours, if it can be occupied as much as possible in divine service or divine remembrance, if we can do that, then we can overcome all the challenges. And she says in a certain sense, we had done it in the Second World War. What an example she is giving. What are these challenges? Second World War, she said, in a way it was done during the Second World War. That's why during the Second World War, she had to, Shubhinder, to say that if you all want the ashram to close, tell me. I will close it myself. But you must understand this is not an ordinary war. There are tremendous forces behind, and people should not ally with all kinds of forces. So there is only one force with which we have to align, and that is the divine. And in the end, there is a very interesting remark that the mother made. Nowadays we talk about galaxy plan and all those plans. So something very touching, something which filled my heart with a deep sense of, if I may use the word, psychic sorrow. When the satellite, the galaxy plan was shown to her, she wrote below it, the divine consciousness crucified by man. I don't think I need to speak any further. She approved of it, she liked it. She said, yes, this is how it is. But below that she wrote, divine consciousness, divine crucified by man, exact words or something like that. So the charter we read about, Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. Auroville belongs to humanity as a whole. But to live in Auroville, one must be a willing servitor of the divine consciousness. And of course we know the rest of the thing. It is a place of an unending education, like a child who Auroville wants to be the bridge between the past and the future, and she kept reminding, not the old way of solving problems. The new way can only come when we discover this new little thing inside us. That's the new. In the Vedas, what is regarded as new is Agni. And when the Agni is born, the Vedic Rishi said child is born, offspring. He has to be guarded, nurtured. In one place in Synthesis of Yoga, she says, Sri Aurobindo says that when we use the word renunciation, we don't mean harshness or crushing things. He says Krishna within is like a child who must be nurtured and nourished, not tortured like the ascetics do. So this is the divine child inside us. That is the new. All else in humanity is old. All the mental ways are old. And that new is not fashion new. It is the newest of the new and the oldest of the old. That we must discover. That is the new way. It will teach us, or it will tell us what is the way. And of course, Superman consciousness and all these things are there. But at least the psychic being, which will open the door to the new way. And it will be a state of material and spiritual researches and a living embodiment of the actual unity. See, mark the words actual unity, not facade of unity, not interreligious dialogues, not interfaith coming together. Age of religions is over. Let people have dialogues wherever they want to have. It's a different ascension altogether. And she says in Auroville, of course she speaks of relation between ashram and Auroville. Ashram remains its role of pioneer, inspirer and guide, and Auroville is an attempt towards collective realization. I'll just quickly read through some of the things. It is for the growth of consciousness and consecration to the truth that has to be realized. Unselfishness is the first need to participate in the creation of Auroville. All those who want an easy life and to do what they please as they please say, let's go to Auroville. It should be just the opposite. People should know that coming to Auroville means an almost superhuman effort for progress. Life is not easy and we take the challenge. That's the beauty. The human soul can take the challenge. We are here to prepare a superhumanity, not to fall back into desires and easy life. The power of the realization, of the sincerity of the realization is such that it's unbearable to those who are insincere. He says that should be the way. And finally, living in Auroville is a choice. But once you choose one thing, some others become incompatible. Very, very clear. There is no ambiguity left. If we make a choice for this, we can't say I'm choosing this, multiple options, I'll switch channels, I'll listen to Astha channel, there is a Babaji giving discourse, it's very boring, let me go to a dance party and let me go to, there is a movie coming. It doesn't work like that. Once we make a choice, nobody compels to make a choice. That's why there is the trial period and all those things. And beautiful word, a utopia on the way to realization. Any movement backward or downward is in contradiction to the life in Auroville, which is life of ascent towards the future. Transformation and progress. Auroville is for those who want to live a life essentially divine. It's not a life where we live just any kind of life. Then it's no point. That life is there everywhere. The whole world is there. And this is, the first step is to discover the psychic being. This freedom must not be a new slavery to the ego, to its desires and ambition. The more we are consciously in contact with our inner being, the more are the exact means given to us. And, okay. For those who are satisfied with the world as it is, Auroville obviously has no reason to exist. Cradle of the Superman, and one very beautiful thing with which we can stop. Okay. You say that Auroville is a dream. Mother says, yes, it is a dream of the Lord. And generally these dreams turn out to be true, much more true than the human so-called realities. Earth needs a place where men can live away from all national rivalries, social conventions, self-contradictory moralities and contending religions. But what does it mean? The second part is a place where human beings, freed from all slavery to the past, can devote themselves wholly to the discovery and practice of the divine consciousness that is seeking to manifest. So when it is said beyond conventions, he says only those who have, it's the discovery of the divine and not to fall back. We are freed from all convention, therefore I'll do whatever I feel like. And the last word is, Auroville wants to be this place. What place? Where one lives wholly to the discovery and practice of the divine consciousness that is seeking to manifest. Auroville wants to be this place and offers itself to all who aspire to live the truth of tomorrow. It's gone beyond time, but if there is something, I don't know. Yes, please.
It's about physical group size. The ashram is maybe 2,000 people in one place. Auroville is supposed to be 50,000 people in one place. Does it change with the internet? If it's a virtual group, is it still the 50,000?
Yes, but definitely the group, the constitution of the group is much more different. I would put it like that, much more than the number. In fact, Auroville, if we go back to what the mother wants, she would want more because of two reasons. One, there were people at some point of time who were asking her for the yoga. And in 1971-72, in fact, there is a famous letter to Ravindraji, who is so close to mother. He was one of the many trustees who was giving work. He says, my family has turned up. It's a very strange letter. So what should I do? She says, I wish I could accommodate more people, but I don't have place. So one thing is that there are people in humanity all over the world who have goodwill, but they are caught up in the usual life of at least earning a basic livelihood and things like that. And ashram cannot provide that kind. It doesn't have the space, and very practically it is not possible. So Auroville is a space much wider, with a much more, it's a township, it's not an ashram. So that way it has a much more possibility of taking in a lot more people. This is one part. Second is, from an evolutionary perspective, there has to be a certain number of humanity for a tipping point to come. Now, of course, that does not depend upon the number who are on the list of Aurovillans. But certainly there has to be more people. But yes, people have to come by the inner calling, and it should be very clear where are you going to come and enter into. So I suppose there is much more, I don't know, I'm not talking about the number that she wrote, but at least there should be a number of more people to, for the realization. But I think first, if we can handle the little that we have, and then the many will come. Yeah. So that's why it will happen. But it will happen when the house is in order. Put it like that. As an in-house person, I can say. Yes. Yes, please.
I did not understand what you said about the legacy plan.
Okay.
So you said that she moved, but she moved under. Can you just say?
Okay, I have a whole talk only on this, dedicated on this. So look at it let's go to the origin. How do galaxies and everything starts? Auroville is a creation of the Supreme Lord. Origin. There's a beautiful line in Who, a poem. See, for these things one has to be a little poetic at heart, not only, but we can use that also. So what is that poem? In Who, Sri Aurobindo describes after a few lines, he says, the hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl. Now if you look at the galaxy, okay, the whirl of the worlds, it's literally something has been set into motion in a spin. Now we have the example of Chandrayaan also, but Chandrayaan is trying to escape, okay? So this spinning motion which holds the things together in a harmony. See, this is something very amazing. As a physicist, when we study this universe, I'm not a physicist, but I have taken a deep interest, fascinated by physics. So when you study the motion of these planets and everything, at its origin, what is that kind of centrifugal force, which keeps them rightly aligned to the center and moving. And whenever there is something which breaks free, it becomes a challenge, the asteroids, etc., as we know that. Now, this is because when we have this world, the cosmic world, that's how it is described. It's right at the beginning, it holds all the different elements of creation together. It's like a sacred geometry in everything, like the swastika. So, swastika is movement in clockwise manner. It represents dynamic movement. Dynamic movement means evolution. And swastika is clock. When you reverse it, then it's, as the mother said, Hitler's case, it's the opposite. So galaxy motion is basically implies that there is, everything is progressing, but always remains connected to the originating impulse which has sent it through, and that creates the harmony and the order constantly. You can stir a water and see, that's how we will see the particles forming a certain unit. It's the way nature operates. It doesn't require intellectual thought. So this is the plan which was given to her. There were a number of plans, but one of them was the galaxy plan, which she liked very much. And that's where I said, but I don't know why, she looked, she smiled, she was happy, but she wrote in her own unique, cryptic way. Let me see if I have put that. Where she wrote something which is very touching. No, I haven't. So she wrote something very interesting, that it is man crucifying the divine. Knowing that perhaps, we can all draw our own meaning, but that's a different matter altogether. But this is a plan which she gave, which is a plan consistent with nature, logic, common sense. And as I said, if you look at the way everything is created, there is a harmony in creation based on that. So that's what the galaxy plan is, that's all. And if you ask me very personally, I've even given a talk. When she has herself given, she has seen something 1,000 years ahead. I've even heard people say, well, it doesn't matter, she's not there, she has let everything. Which is very jarring. It's okay, outside we can speak all these things, it doesn't matter. And well, here also one can speak and do whatever, it's up to each one. But look at the logic, she has seen all this, then one can say that about anything. Why make Matri Mandir? Somebody asked me that why, actually a group of students, that there is so much gold which is put outside, don't you think it would have been better to feed poor people? People ask this, logic, very logical. I said, yes, there are plenty of people in the world to feed poor people. But there are very few who can manifest the divine consciousness in matter. So I said, Mother spoke about Matri Mandir, which is the soul of Auroville. She said that it is the divine's answer to man seeking for perfection. Look at it this way, the building, it's so symbolic, round, the wholeness. Then each little unit, and on that, so like a honeycomb, it's described by Sri Aurobindo as what is the ideal, perfect, ultimate of creation, where each comb of the honeycomb is able to taste all the honey in all the combs. It is so beautiful, and at the core of it is that divine consciousness, very symbolically represented. It's described in Savitri, how beautifully that single ray lighting up and trembling. So that's how it is. It is, she has given. Now, if we have to make everything on our own, in this world we have tried, and we have failed, and we have failed miserably. And that's why she says Auroville is for those who understand that human efforts have their limitations, and that's why the divine is there to help us and guide us. As simple as that. But there are things where she may not have said anything. I don't think she actually foresaw the plan of Savitri Bhavan and did that. So Savitri Bhavan has come up like that, by an inspiration, by those who have been connected, Shraddhavan, and many, they felt inspired and got connected. So there is a place for that also. So all these things are there, but the core, there are some core elements. They are best left undisturbed. Because they are the core elements. There is so much scope for new kind of architecture and several places, and that's why it is unending education, research of all kinds, spiritual and other things. All that is there. But this is the core. Normally in anything, core is kept intact. Like tomorrow we may say, what is the point of even using the word divine consciousness? Every human being is divine. It will be misapplication of a profound truth. Why human beings then? Even the reptile is divine. So my take is very simple. Yes, not only human beings, The snake is also divine. Please bring in the home, put it around your neck and go to sleep because it's divine. Now this means everyone is potentially divine, it has to be discovered. So core is divine. Now we can't shift that core and imagine that things will come up. So that's how it is. So that's the galaxy plan about which I was sharing. Okay, so thank you so much. Namaste.